Well, good night, everyone. I am Asha Kissoon. I'll be your moderator tonight. Welcome to Globespan 24/7. First of all, I'd like to thank the persons responsible tonight, Mr. Nohar Singh, our audience, and everybody that has been reaching out to Globespan 24/7. I can promise you tonight is going to be a great show as we have some very interesting topics. The main thing we're going to discuss tonight is the way forward for Guyana. And in this discussion, we have two wonderful guests with us. First of all, we have Mr. Shuman, the leader and the presidential candidate of the Liberty and Justice Party. Welcome, Mr. Shuman.
Good evening, Asha.
And soon to join us is Mr. Adam Harris, former editor with Kaichor News. He was running a bit late, but he'll be with us soon. So we all know we are at 142 days after election. Today on March 2nd, the country is in a bit of political turmoil, if I may say it in such a way. We've had 5 sets of declarations made. We've had 4 court cases in counting going on at the moment, and the entire world and the country at whole wants to know what's the way forward. Mr. Shuman, the first thing I'm going to ask you tonight before we get into the details is, in your opinion, what's the political climate in Guyana right now? How do you see the people and what they're feeling at the moment based on everything that's happening?
Well, let me say good evening to your viewers first, and obviously thanks to Nohar and his team for accommodating me, and thanks to you for accommodating me on this show. It's always a pleasure being here. I think that there is a somber mode that has overcome the PNC camp in light of Madam Chief Justice's ruling 2 days ago. You know, the fact that, no, it wasn't 2 days ago, it was yesterday. The fact that she very succinctly dispatched their appeal, stating that it was baseless, amongst a variety of other things. And I think all along, the political operatives within the PNC had strewn their people to the point where they tried to convince them, convince. And the fact that Madam Chief Justice, and I would say it's a very comprehensive delivery that was put forth yesterday, she took the wind completely out of their sails. So there seems to be a somber mood that has overcome the PNC camp, in my view. I can't say that it has emboldened the PPP's camp or the rest of the population, because I think all along they knew what the logical steps were, what logic would have dictated, and that was the outcome from yesterday. So right now there's this calm. Everyone is still awaiting the Court of Appeals decision, and you know we'll obviously dissect that a bit as we go along. But for now, there seems to be a quiet or a quiet calm that has overcome the capital at this point, if I were to put it that way.
I must say, I noticed the same thing happening. Everybody's quiet, everybody's observing and waiting. But I believe it's the still before the storm, the quiet before the storm. Because of the judicial system and all the processes that everybody are going through right now, they are calm and waiting. I noticed there was a very interesting article today, or a press release by the incumbents, where they said they were willing to speak to political parties. Myself from the TNM, you from the Liberty and Justice Party, and our partner, and you United Guyana and our joiner, we do have a seat now in Parliament. We are some of these new parties that have taken a step forward. But what's your opinion on their idea of having dialogue after 142 days, given everything that has happened so far?
I think it is disingenuous, if I were to put it that way, to come to this point. You know that you're at the end of the rope. There is no other direction for you to go. There is no escape from your fate at this point. You have had from December 21st, 2018 to date. So while we're looking at 146 days for elections, we're 20 months now from no confidence motion to elections. And that is something that we have to all be very cognizant about, right? That is 17 months overdue, elections. So they've had 20 months for dialogue, but never ever once reached out genuinely to any political party or anyone to have this so-called dialogue. And now when you get to the end of the rope, you're on the final strand. You've had this massive rope to hold on to bring everyone to hold on to a piece of that. And bit by bit, it got peeled away from you. And then you're down to this final strand. And you're at the tip of it, the very end of it. And then you're trying to reach your hand for someone to help you after you've shooed everyone else away. So I find it very disingenuous. And I really find it also in very poor taste. Why I say disingenuous and poor taste is they continue to lie to the Guyanese people. They continue to lie to their supporters. When I saw the press statement, and I also saw Joseph Harmon speaking about it, that there were massive irregularities. I was present, you were present, members from your party, my party, every single political party, all of the observers present did not see that evidence except the baseless allegations and accusations by the APNU AFC agents, and not all of them, just a few of them. So to still continue to peddle that lie shows that you're not genuine about what you want to do. You still want to continue to lie to the people, continue to lie to your supporters, and expect that people are going to trust that you're interested in genuine dialogue. Not that there's anything to be talking about at this juncture, because we've been overtaken by a court challenge, and we still have to wait the outcome of that. But once again, we could get into that at some point. But I don't see that. I don't view their or them reaching out with any seriousness, or for them to be viewed as genuinely interested in dialogue or meaningful dialogue. I don't see it that way at all.
I found it very interesting that the same people that are slowing up the democratic process are trying to be the solution by reaching out to parties now. It brings about the question of shared governance. It's something that is being discussed along the lines. We've all spoken about it on several occasions. But then now, are we to ask ourselves, can we really work with the persons that have been responsible for trying to rig this election? What's your opinion on that?
Asha, if you have a tennis roll, right, and I take that tennis roll away from you, I take it, and then the court, the police, everyone comes by and says, you know what, Lenox, that is Asha's tennis roll. And we fight and we fight and we fight till everyone in the world recognizes that it is your tennis roll. And then now I'm going to come and ask you to share that tennis roll, right? That the only way forward for us is to share this tennis roll. Then what have I done? It means that what I'm trying to do is to bully you into giving me something that is not mine. And that is what the PNC has done through this process. They have not been genuinely interested in shared governance. They've had 2015 to 2020 to address the shared governance component. And there is no legal framework for shared governance at this point. So that discussion in itself, let's solve the democratic issue first. Let's also move to a referendum if we have to, because I know that neither the PPP nor the PNC are interested in constitutional reform. The only way, in my view, is to put that to a referendum and let the people now drive it, so that you don't have a 65-seat parliament telling people what they can and cannot do, what they should and should not do. It is now driven by the people. Let's put it to a referendum. Excuse me.
All right.
So after that referendum, then you're going to have an opportunity to look at how you could deal with the constitutional revision and address shared governance in that context. But as it stands right now, there is no such formula. There is no legal basis for shared governance in Guyana. And bullying your way into trying to attain that it is not the most practical way. It is not the best way, considering what you have put this country through right now. There's no trust. You've eroded every single iota of trust that the people had in you.
All right, I understand 100% what you're saying. At the same time, we need to acknowledge that they do have a large following. They do have supporters and people in their parties who are still with them. Ultimately, we do need constitutional
Thank you.
reform. Good night, Mr. Harris. Welcome to Globespan
Very,
24/7.
thank you. Thank you.
Hello,
Okay,
Adam.
so we'll bring you up to speed
Hi,
in a
Lenox.
moment. Okay, so we have been discussing the political atmosphere in Guyana. My question was, what is your opinion of the current situation, the people's responses? And we also discussed the fact that a press release was put out today by the incumbents saying that they're ready to speak to political parties. Can you please give your opinion on that?
Sorry. Oh, the last part, I didn't get that. You're asking
I
me
was
my
saying,
opinion of the current situation, and
yes, in Guyana
you
right now.
my opinion.
Yes, on the people's responses to the current situation, and also in relation to the press release put out by APNU today that they're willing to speak to political parties. What do you feel about that? How do you feel about
In a minute, I bet the dogs are going on at a rate outside, and I'm going to use my headphone instead. Um,
it? Great.
I'm sorry, I just rushed in, uh,
It's
and I'm
okay.
trying to get settled and all of that. Just
While
came in.
there, I'll continue by saying, like I was saying earlier, the APNU does represent a large following, and ultimately, there will need to be a representation for them. They are the opposition now. But like you have said earlier, and I agree, there's no room for bullying. The word for it is cantankerous, actually. And there really isn't any room for that. So on the way forward, they would be sitting down as the opposition, but everybody has to work together for the betterment of the people.
I quite agree with you that they do have a large support base. There are some there are some things that are wrong with that. First, we need to transition into a constituency-based representation or representative system. And I think that once we deal with that component, we may find a departure from the race-based politics in itself. I think when people talk about shared governance, and I may not understand the concept or what people are trying to talk about shared governance, because this is the nature of politics, that a party wins and a party lose, or multiple party in this case lose, right? If you look at it, 10 political parties contested nationally, of which one political party won. Um, so, in terms of the shared governance component, I may not be schooled enough to offer a diverse view aside from what I understand. But shared governance, based on how it has been described by certain people, is representative of what you have in China or what you have in Cuba or what you had in the before the breakup of the USSR. Shared governance in itself, if you look at that, then there is no backstop from that political entity, that massive political entity against the people. Now, who checks the government against the people? There would be no backstop. And the system that we have right now provides that backstop because every 5 years, um, the cycle comes to an end and they get an opportunity to either endorse or not endorse the next political party. So right now, as it is, it may not be working 100% perfect, but there is a lot of credence to be given to the political structures that we have. The second component of that is that when you talk about shared governance, then how do you now go into elections? There would be no need for elections. And we are not at that juncture yet where we talk about a governance structure that is meant to look out for the entire country where we don't have elections. What we're talking about is a formulation of the new world order. But the country is not there yet, and the world is not there yet. And the new world order talks about one governance structure that caters to the entire world in a singular drive to enhance humanity, if I were to
All
put it that
right,
way.
let me just stop
Very
there
concise.
because the one world order is completely different. And in order for Guyana to have a shared governance system, it would have to be directly for Guyana. We cannot take a system from another country. There would have to be meetings. There would have to be a specialized team to sit down and put it together. It would not be an overnight process, but it can be an end goal. Mr. Harris, are you connected? You're still mute. Can you unmute your microphone?
All right, that's
Oh,
done.
okay, my question for you is, what's your opinion on the political climate in Ghana right now, the people's responses? And we also saw a press release from the APNU today saying that they were willing to speak to political parties. What's your take on that?
Okay. As it stands, the political situation has been very prolonged in the wake of the elections. That's the first thing. We talk about speaking with the other political parties. I think Joe Harmon was the one who issued that statement, and he didn't say about what. I don't know whether he wants to talk about getting the court action to an end. I don't know whether he wants to talk about shared governance, as Lennox was saying. I don't know what he wants to talk about, and I'm not going to hazard a guess at this time. What I can say is that the coalition is insisting on valid votes being used to determine the outcome of the elections. The Caribbean Court of Justice said that valid votes are those votes that were counted during the recount, counted and tabulated. The coalition is saying, listen, during the recount, we identified a lot of flaws, a lot of anomalies, a lot of irregularities. The coalition is also contending that the Guyana Elections Commission should have taken those things into consideration. Obviously, that didn't happen when the chairman decided we were going to count those 49 ballot boxes, and put them into the mix. Now, if we're to go with the CCJ and those ballots are counted, then they're supposed to be valid. The coalition doesn't agree with that, and that's the conundrum that we have at the moment. Where does it end? It's at the Court of Appeal right now to try to overturn a decision by the Chief Justice, who said, look, that initial count on March 13 was overtaken. She went on to say that the Chief Elections Officer isn't a Lone Ranger. So he's on the direction of GCOM. And GCOM advised him to prepare a report based on the tabulated figures after the recount. So there seems to be a stalling there. He seems not prepared to do that. The coalition seems not prepared to accept the tabulated accounts based on the fact that it says, hey, we identified a lot of irregularities. We talked about voter impersonation and all of that. My take, there must be a resolution. We've been at this for nearly 4 months. How do we resolve it? I'm not a politician, just an ordinary reporter. I don't know. Perhaps that is what Harmon wants to talk to the other parties about. I don't know.
All right, so just let me remind the audience before I allow Mr. Shuman to respond to what you said to us. The issue of valid votes and flaws in the system has been gone over several times in several court cases by various persons. We had David Moore, Jones now, there was a case with Hollander. There are several cases that went on over and over. And the issue of what valid votes were has been spoken about several times. That is what is there in the representation of the People's Acts, all the way to our final court, the Caribbean Court of Justice, who ruled that the recount figures must be used. The largest irregularity that was there was when Mr. Mingo brought that spreadsheet and showed numbers that were not correlating with any political party's numbers. So, Mr. Shuman, what's your response to what's happening there?
I I hear what Adam is saying, and I think that that issue has been dealt with multiple times, as you have stated, by multiple courts. I find it very disturbing that these so educated and learned people in the APNU camp continue to peddle lies when they know fully well what the Representation of People Act says. There were 10 political parties plus a variety of observers present at the recount. And all that every single political party and the observers witnessed were accusations by the APNU counting agents there. Simply allegations. There was nothing of substance. And if you look at the 27 boxes that Adam is talking about, the only issue with that is that those 27 boxes were in PPP stronghold. And when I actually saw a letter from one of the presiding officers talking about the communication that was received, and I even got a text from one of them as to very explicit instructions as to what documents to put in the ballot box and what to send separately. There is also the issue of the video taken at Ashman's building. Two videos actually taken at Ashman's building where you had GCOM staff taking documents out of envelopes, removing them, opening them, resealing them. All of these things bring into question the legitimacy of the information that is being peddled by the APNU AFC camp. I remember when we were at the recount and they go through these series of numbers. They're questioning, did serial so and so and so vote? In some cases, they called out serial numbers that were not even present in voting district. I think one of them ended at 296, and they ended up calling up to 305, 306 and onward. And the agents just sat there and said, you know what, no, let them go ahead and do what they do. But the serial ended at 296, and they're just calling above and beyond. And when they say, all right, well, you know what, serial number 290, correction, 290, 292 and stuff, voted. And we asked the GCOM agent, we want to see if that is crossed off. The GCOM agent said, no, you cannot see that. That is our information. So there is no way to verify that there was actually a discrepancy in anything at that juncture. So the issue of statutory documents and all these things, those were under clear instructions given by the DCEO to these folks. And one more thing I wanted to touch on. Aside from those instructions that the DCEO gave to these agents, every single thing that they have done is simply produce an allegation that they have found sympathy with GCOM's chief operating, the chief elections officer, that they found favor and sympathy with him to include those in his report and give credence to it. That is all that they have done. Remember, Keith Lowenfield pretty much set the date for the elections. He set all the players on the field. He got the material procured. He got everything, this entire machinery together. And when it was done, then he has the audacity to turn around and say, well, hold on a sec, I was cheated out of this. Because we all know which side he batted for.
All right. So I think we have spoken a lot about that particular topic. We're all
No,
aware
but
that yes,
sorry.
that
I would just like to reply a little bit to Lennox.
of course.
One of the things you said, Lennox, is that they got instructions of what to put in the box, and you said from the DCEO. The DCEO denied that. Now, when these agents were trained at the training session, they were what to put into the box. How is it that in most of the boxes this was done, and only those boxes in the PPP stronghold this wasn't done? The other thing that you said was that there were allegations. Now, you would remember, and I would remember, that when the matter was, when some of these things were sent to GCOM contacted the Immigration Department, and the Immigration Department actually verified that some of those people who were said to have voted were not in the country. That was verified. Now, if that's verified, it can't be an allegation anymore. Then the coalition produced death certificates to show that some of the people who voted were actually dead. And GCOM accepted these death certificates. Yes, a few people came up to say, hey, I was in the country. So they couldn't say I didn't vote. But none of them went to the police to clear that up. Anybody can jump up and say, hey, I was here. But unless you go to the police, the records will show that you weren't here. So we had instances of proof with the absent people voting, and we have the death certificates for people who voted. Certainly that couldn't be an allegation anymore.
Adam, I disagree with you because there was actually plain allegation there that in my community, for example, an indigenous community where people they do not have the means to travel, they don't even have a passport, but yet they're listed as being out of the country. One of them is my cousin, who has been bedridden for over 3 years. And when we looked at the sheet that came back, her name was on there, but yet she does not even have the capacity nor means to travel. And I think most of those allegations would have been dealt with by your former employer. Now, I want to touch on something. The Representation of the People Act is very, very clear. What represents an invalid ballot? There are 7 items that are listed in the Representation of People Act that deals with invalidating a ballot. The second point I want to make is that at all of those stations, you had GCOM agents, you had police officers, you had observers, and you had members of other political parties. Not all members from other political parties were present, but you had all of these people present. Now, are we going to say now that these people are all co-conspirators in this massive fraud? Are you going to now tell me that the APNU AFC agents, and they didn't only have one, multiple agents, were complicit in their duty, that they pretty much conspired with the other political party to defraud Guyanese of their votes?
Allow me to say that as much as these things have been gone over by the current government and the opposition over and over again, they tried to give evidence, birth certificates, going to the immigration department, dead people voting, where we did find people come forward to talk about the documents, presiding officers, election agents giving evidence that they did put those documents or give it to GCOM. Nothing came out of it. But the question at hand is not if there were irregularities. The question at hand is how do you deal with it? As we all know, it should be taken to the court through an election petition after a declaration is made. It does not stop a declaration from going forward, and that much is clear. So as much as we could go back and forth and discuss, well, APNU did this and party agents did that, and who fell under the bus and who was forced to be under the bus, we know that an election petition after the declaration is the way forward. I'd like to bring it to our attention that yesterday we had a meeting of the OAS, the Organization of American States. There was an obvious call from 21 countries that a declaration should be made in Guyana after several important persons gave their opinions and their observations on what was happening. I noticed that Guyana was represented by 2 persons from the incumbent and 2 persons from the opposition, being the Attorney General, Basil Williams, and the former Minister of Foreign Affairs, Karen Cummins. And in her statement to the OAS, she said that the CARICOM report was a fallacy. And Basil Williams went on to mention that the Caribbean Court of Justice had overruled the recount, that it shouldn't be used, basically what he was saying. Now, the first thing I would like to ask, I'll start with you, Mr. Adam Harris, is what's your opinion on the OAS meeting that took place yesterday? And how do you feel about the statements that were made by the incumbent, particularly the issues I just mentioned?
I listened, I heard the OAS meeting, I heard Bruce Golding, and of course he was talking about allegations. He did talk about the CARICOM team, and Karen Cummings did say that yes, they were there as the big word, interlocutor. Point to note, these CARICOM observers only examined 18% of the ballot boxes counted, 18%. Now, if you're an accountant and you have to audit a business, you would not audit and give the business a clear bill of health on 18% of the votes. That's the first thing. So Karen was saying that you can't take the CARICOM report at face value. She also said that the people have been making these points. And I'll tell you something. When the issue of those boxes came up, it actually went to a vote in the Elections Commission whether they should be counted. And by a majority decision with the chairman casting her vote with the opposition commissioners, those boxes were counted. Now, we can say, all right, GCOM has agreed that the boxes, whether they contained valid votes or not, were counted. Then you also said that, look, 21 people are calling for the government to concede. The government is holding out that they were invalid votes. At this stage, that, I mean, you're saying we should go past that. I am saying, listen, if the CARICOM team only observed 18% of the votes, I certainly would not accept that report at face value, because it's not enough to certify an entire elections. You have 82% still out there, and they did not see that. So they pronounced on an entire election on only an observation involving 18% of those boxes. And that is the position of the coalition. You can't take that to say, hey, the entire elections were thing. The very CARICOM observers admitted that they saw flaws, they saw irregularities. And then they said in those 18%, those irregularities weren't enough to overturn an election. You can't arrive at that conclusion on such a small figure. You really can't. But the whole world is saying, well, that's what they said, so let's accept what they said. And that is the problem at the moment.
Mr.
Adam,
Shuman, what's your take?
I think that it is. Well, first, I must say I was quite embarrassed to see, people representing Guyana with that caliber at the OAS. And I have to disagree with you. It is not 18 persons
18%.
that are.
Percent.
No,
18%.
So let me finish. It's not 18 persons calling for the government to accept the transition. It is 18 countries. Those persons represent states. So when they ask for the government to accept a transition or to start into a transition of administration, it is not just the persons talking. They're speaking on behalf of their nation. So we have to ensure that we don't separate those two. It is 18 countries actually saying, look, Guyana, get your act together and start a transition. I don't know if it was 18 or 21. But in terms of the percentage, we have to remember that the CARICOM also had an observer team that was present. So the report that was presented or delivered based on the recount is not a report done in isolation and only representative of what transpired at the recount process. They were here for the tabulation. They understood what happened on polling day. So the report that was generated out of the recount was coupled with that observation report that was produced before.
That's
also,
not true. That's
absolutely
not true. No, couldn't have been.
Adam, that is absolutely true. And the next part is, while they may have only been there for 18%, what is the accepted international sample level for any test? It is actually 13%, I think, or lower.
No.
So when they have 18%, that is 5% above what is internationally accepted as a good sample size.
No,
now,
Lennox.
there were also observers who were present that witnessed 100% of that recount process. You had the private sector commission, you have the Georgetown Chamber of Commerce, you had all political parties that contested in those regions, you had the Ethnic Relations Commission, plus you had the OAS there. So all of these things, it is not only about observing 18%. And I want to highlight this point very, very clearly, that when they talk about there were certain irregularities that were not enough to offset.
I think we lost Mr. Shuman there for a second. Probably he's having technical difficulties. But in the meantime, while we're waiting for him to come back, oh, there he is.
Yeah. So
okay, let's just give him a moment.
there seems to be someone wanting to get a hold of me so desperately. I'll get to them later. But the issues about the irregularities that they're talking about is when they we had this discussion with the observer team that was here in terms of what they would have seen. Granted, they didn't give us much, but we expressed our views to them, and we said, look, what we see in those rooms is just maybe a ballot where there might have been a check mark instead of an X, where there is a scratch somewhere and then an X. Those are the irregularities that I think that they were talking about. It's not irregularities of massive voter or ballot discrepancies. There was no such thing. What they're talking about, the irregularities in that sense, are so minuscule that it would not offset the results of these elections. And they did not want that to be absent from the electoral process because it has to deal with electoral reform, how we go about our electoral business.
Mr. Harris, before you respond, I'd like to remind you that during the recount process, we had counting agents and we had tabulation agents. And although they were only present for 18% of the counting, they were present for 100% of the tabulation every day in the tabulation room, where all discrepancies were aired, where all discussions were done about the recount for each day. And the point that Mr. Shuman made is a valid one. We no longer have the old fight between PPP and APNU. We have more political parties that have stepped up. We had more eyes on the recount. It's not just one party crying wolf. We had a lot of observers to the extent that some were even denied entry the Carter Center et al. So on going forward, we understand that Mr. David Granger himself said that the CARICOM voice was the one voice of reason in all of this throughout the recount. And I personally believe it's a slap in their face for a former minister to call their report a fallacy.
I don't agree. I don't agree. Those of us who were following the thing, we looked, and Lennox, you talked about all these other observers, and you talked about the CARICOM report encompassing what the other CARICOM observers saw. That's not true. It was a detailed report. It spoke of the number of boxes they looked at. And they said, we saw this. And then they extrapolated to say, look, this is what we saw, but we are going to talk about the entire elections. Mr. Granger did say that CARICOM would have been among the best people. Now you have 3 CARICOM representatives to count 2,339 boxes, am I right? Or not to scrutinize the 2,000 boxes. An impossibility. I don't have a problem with that. You had other people there. What you also had was whenever the coalition people identified the problem on their observation report, there were objections. If they said, look, there are no poll documents in this box, we are going to enter this. There were objections to that. And you, Lennox, know that many poll boxes did not have documents. I spoke to the GCOM chairman, and she said to me, our people were complicit in some of these things. She said she advised the chief elections officer to call in the police. And he declined at the time because it would have been embarrassing. And if you were on the ground, as a lot of us, you would know and you would have heard that some people were paid. Some people disappeared. They were looking for some returning officers and couldn't find them. One returning officer, the man from Region 1, he provided the poll documents that were outside of the box. No other returning officer did. So you couldn't verify the votes in those boxes. And that is the issue at the moment. That is why the coalition has gone to court to argue this issue of valid votes. I mean, you can count anything. But if you don't have supporting documentation to what you're counting, how do you accept it?
Mr. Harris, we will take a break now and go to a commercial. And when we get back, I'll allow Mr. Shuman to respond. Then we'll move on.
Globespan 24
Take the family or maybe go with friends on a train getaway to Boston and Cape Cod. Explore Boston City with a multi-day hop-on hop-off bus tour where you can immerse yourself in its rich history and New England charm. Then take the Provincetown ferry over to Cape Cod. The quaint villages, serene beaches, and renowned seafood restaurants will make you never want to leave. This Boston and Cape Cod package includes round-trip coach tickets to Boston, the Provincetown ferry, and 3 nights hotel accommodation. So book Boston and Cape Cod with Globespan. It has something for everyone. Call Globespan to book at 718-845-0437. That's 718-845-0437. And book your Boston and Cape Cod train getaway today.
Welcome back, everyone, to Globespan 24/7. We're having a very interesting conversation tonight with Mr. Lenox Shuman and Mr. Adam Harris. Just before we went on a break, Mr. Harris was explaining to us the importance of valid votes and why we're currently in this position in Guyana. So, Mr. Shuman, would you like to respond to the last statement made by Mr. Harris?
That is a very quick 2 minutes. The reality of it is anything to deal with validity of a vote actually is dealt with very explicitly in the Representation of People Act. Timothy Jonas from UN United Guyana did a very fantastic job at explaining how it is how impossible it is for anyone to go and vote for someone else, for someone who is deceased or anything of the sort. And when you put all of those things together, and Adam, I'm glad that you recognize that I was there. I was present at polling booths. I was present at the recount, so I saw the machinery how it operated. The unfortunate thing is I never saw Joe Harmon in any of those counting rooms. I never saw Sherrod Duncan. I never saw Christopher Jones. I never saw many of these other commentators. When we went through the counting or the recount process once again, all they kept spewing was an allegation of a lot of things that were dispatched by all of the other political parties that were present. So what they have essentially been doing all along is just lying to their supporters. You mean to tell me that in APNU AFC areas, that everything went off 100% accurately? Because that is what these guys were doing. When you know that you're coming up to an APNU stronghold, there is no issue, no objections, nothing wrong, even though you still have the same things. You know, you still have counterfoils missing, you still have poll books. Well, poll books are not required to be part of that. They're not supposed to be in a box. That is why the Region 1 guy actually had it. He said because those things generally reside in the offices that they're assigned. So there's no requirement to put the poll book in. So when we sat there, you mean to tell me that only in APNU areas, things went off spotless, even though the very same things that they're accusing, or what I'd say, alleging, that are missing are not, and they're missing in their areas too, but it seems to have posed no problems to them whatsoever. That is hypocrisy at its finest.
What if there were...
That brings me to my next question, which would give you both a chance to continue that conversation along that line. We have our latest court case, which is at the Court of Appeal. Ms. Inga Jones, who took it as a private citizen, even though she was a counting agent for APNU during the recount process, she's trying to say that that process is not valid anymore. The case is set for Saturday. But I would like to ask you, what's your opinion on the end game of all these court cases that we're having? Do you predict that we'll end up at the Caribbean Court of Justice again, and another private citizen comes in after that? And after that, what do you think is the solution to this endless courts scenario that we're having at the moment?
In the first instance, people are challenging aspects of the elections, they aren't just going to the court shouting. For example, in this case, they're challenging the Chief Justice for ignoring the issue of valid votes. Prior to that, they challenged the GCOM commissioner for not taking the advice of the chairman, and that went on. And I want to go back to the 13th of March. You know, we're saying, and indeed, we should go by way of an elections petition. The results could have been declared on the 13th of March, and the PPP would have had to go to court on an elections petition. But the PPP went to the court almost immediately, and Landlal took the issue to court even before the declaration was made. So when we talk about elections petition, that should have been from the beginning. It wasn't. The other thing you talk about, Jones being a counting agent, and Lennox was saying, look, in the APNU, AFC areas, there were the same problems with the missing poll book. Was there any documentation? There was none. Not one person said, hey, this is happening here. So, Lennox, all we have is your word to say that there were missing poll documents. We don't know that there were missing poll documents. The other thing that we haven't looked at is, and I mean, you know Guyana. Asha, you know Guyana. I don't know how long you've been overseas. But there were people who were scared to be in some PPP areas after dark. So people actually abandoned their posts, and that was made clear. And if you don't have any polling agent in the place, what do you think happened? So you had, in some cases, more votes cast than you had voters. I mean, there were a lot of irregularities, and these were noted, duly noted. GCOM actually said, listen, all right, make your notes, put them in the observation report, and we will look at them. GCOM didn't really look at those observation reports. Hence, the vote on those ballot boxes that were questionable. Hence, the issue of, listen, we are not going to deal with that now. We can deal with it later, but the 33 days ran out, and it never dealt with those issues. So there are a lot of things. There were a lot of things wrong. And
okay.
a lot.
No, finish up. Sorry, I thought you were finished.
No, it's all right. No, I can stop there. There were a lot of things wrong, and they weren't addressed by the commission.
Adam,
okay, so please allow Mr. Shuman to respond. I found something very interesting in what you said just now, that on the 13th of March, those numbers could have been used in a declaration made and PPP go to court in an election petition. Let me remind the audience that there were 5 sets of numbers presented on the 2nd of March, 5th of March, 13th, 8th, 13th of June, 8th of June, 13th of June, and 23rd of June. And it was quite obvious that each time numbers were presented, they were different. I believe that APNU was in a unique position to come forward and show their SOPs and prove that the PPP and the other parties were wrong in their numbers. And I'm still waiting for that to happen, to be honest. We're in a unique position now where we went through a recount process. And that recount process showed that the 9 parties plus the People's Progressive Party's numbers had correlated. And I can speak for myself, Mr. Shuman, and the New United Guyana, and also for the Citizens Initiative. We had our own numbers. We did not take PPP numbers. We did not take any SOPs from any of the larger parties. And because of the specificity of what we went through in that recount process, and we know which party is in the lead and which party has won. The reason we're here is because Mr. Mingo made a declaration of Region 4 on numbers that did not match anybody at all. And that would have been fraudulent to make a declaration and a win for the APNU and ask the PPP to then take it in an election petition. Ms. Shuman, please give your response.
Well, I want to touch on something that Adam brought up earlier. You know, when Madam Chair, as he's stating anyway, that Madam Chair said that some of their officers were complicit in this process. The reason why Keith Lowenfield did not call in the police is because it would have uncovered Claremont Mingo's fraud. That is, what, in my view, that is the only deterrent that existed for him to not be able to call in the police. Now, I want to touch on this issue of votes, ballots, all of these things. And Asha, I'm glad that you brought up the point of the SOPs. In order to populate a statement of poll, all of the requisite documents, whether it's oath of identity, counterfoil, spoiled ballots, valid ballots, all of these things have to be present before not only the elections agent, the presiding officer, but the political parties endorse those SOPs, the statement of polls. So all of those requisite documents have to be present there. If for some odd reason that the APNU AFC felt that there was some discrepancy between the statement of recount or what they see transpire in that process, it is very simple. If there are 27 boxes that have questions, just provide GCOM's 27 SOPs for those respective areas, and if they are populated in a manner that matches the SORs, then by virtue of that, it means that all of the statutory documents were present, and then you could verify the numbers. But the PNC, the APNU never ventured out to produce their SOPs to say, look, these are the issues and we have our numbers to prove it, and these are the numbers to show it to the public. They never did that. And the reason they would never do that, it is because the recount in itself unveiled the mask that they were trying to put on these elections. The next point I want to make is that when Mr. Mingo in himself went through that process, I was present at that recount. And it was very clear that he was not complying with the Representation of People Act. And the reason, and I cannot speak for the PPP, but I could speak based on the conversation that we've had with Anil and the legal team. When they went there and Madam Chief Justice says, Claremont Mingo, you have to comply with the law. And when he went back to Ashman's building, he went down the same path as he did before, without using the SOPs to compile those numbers. So basically, the numbers that he had compiled were already flawed. There was already a contempt of court issue with him. And then he went to the GCOM office and continued with the same fraudulent numbers and continued to tabulate with those fraudulent numbers as a base. So basically, he did not only broke the law, he also violated the contempt, the stay and everything that was there. So if you're seeing someone do something wrong, Adam, if you're seeing someone do something blatantly wrong, do you not have a responsibility to stop them in their tracks and say, you, sir, are not complying with the law, and you need to cease and desist forthwith? And that is what we attempted to do. And Madam Chair did that when she said, look, we are going to undertake to do a recount. And that is how we got to the Artichung Convention Center.
No, she didn't undertake to do a recount. The recount was based on an agreement between Granger and Jagdeo. But I want to say something. The Chief Justice said to Mingo, the Elections Commission has the correct statement of poll. That was what she said to him. And then she directed him to go, put it up, and tabulate using a video screen so people could see what he was putting up. That was it. I don't know about this contempt of court business. The other thing you talked about was the chairperson saying, let's have the recount. And you, Asha, were saying they never produced the statements of poll. Those statements of poll would have been produced. However, the recount superseded the need to present the statements of poll. So it became statements of recount as opposed to statement of poll. There was no declaration on the 2nd of March. The first set of figures started coming in the next day, the 3rd of March. Mingo's declaration was made on the 6th of March. And that's when there was the invasion of the GCOM Center. And all of this nonsense. And Granger decided to go to Jagdeo. And that's why, who was it? Was it Yulita Moore? Went to court to challenge Granger's decision to seek a recount. And that matter was halted because the PPP moved to the High Court. Who was the judge doing? Who was the magistrate doing the case? I don't remember his name right now. I don't have my notes. But that was being done. Had Granger not intervened, there would have been a declaration and there would have been a swearing in, and we would have had to go to court by way of an elections petition. But that's all past, that's history, it never happened. We went to the recount. And in the recount, we had these anomalies. Miss Lam, for example, said that she didn't have people. She got some statements of poll on her own, and she got some from the PPP. And she went public with the fact that some of the statements of poll she got from the PPP did not mesh with some that she had. And you, Lennox, were aware.
I want to correct you before you go on. I have spoken to Ms. Lam several times. She did not accept any statements of polls from the PPP. What she did say is that in her assessment and analysis, since they were made public, she compared some of the numbers and the differences she saw were very minimal. Please continue.
Yeah, look, we're not going to break a lance over this. But the fact is, she saw differences. The PPP itself adjusted some of the statements of polls that it posted. I mean, look, there was a lot wrong. They were dodging and hemming. For the matter, Lennox would have been aware that the first set of reports that the PPP put up were dated February 29, even before the elections. And that in itself should tell a story. But all of that is done. As we stand now, we are at the Court of Appeal. Wherever it goes, it goes. Yes, the coalition is saying there were irregularities. CARICOM said there were irregularities. And so there is no disputing that there were irregularities. There were irregularities. CARICOM on the 18% of the votes, it said, concluded that, well, these weren't enough to overturn the election. Perhaps if they had been able to see more, that report might have been different. But again, all of that is hindsight. The bottom line is, and it was Anil who said, fraud is fraud. If there is one, then that's it. It so happened that that music has changed. So, as it goes, a lot of people, the 21 countries and all of that, are prepared to accept that there was some fraud. But let's close our eyes to those fraud. Let's change the government. Let's have a transition. So, what's there to talk about? There is fraud, there was fraud, and If there was fraud, there was fraud.
Before I go on to my next question,
I
let me
want
remind you that
I want to
okay, Mr. Shuman. Sure.
comment on something that Adam said there. Adam, I disagree with you. It is not because of Mr. Granger's intervention that is why we had a recount. At the contempt hearing against Mr. Mingo, part of Madam Chair's submission to the court, to Madam Chief Justice, was that she is going to undertake a recount of all ballots. And what happened is that CARICOM team, when they were here, the five honorable prime ministers from CARICOM came, we sat down with them and we laid out a path as where the potential exists for conflict in Guyana and how we could resolve it. And it is on that premise that they engaged both the president and the leader of the opposition to ensure that this process was concluded appropriately. And that is how we got to the recount process. It is not just Mr. Granger. If you look at it, I would say Mr. Granger and his team have taken an active role in obstructing every single component of a declaration that says that they have not won. Now, if you want to talk about the fraudulent components of things, there seems to be one large fraud that always escapes the APNU AFC camp. And that is the fraud that was perpetrated by Claremont Mingo. No one wants to talk about that. No one wants to talk about the fraud that Keith Lowenfield attempted to do to disenfranchise 275,000 people and then later 115,000 people. That is the magnitude.
Mr. Harris, before you respond, Mr. Harris, let me remind you that the CARICOM report did say there were irregularities, but there was no evidence to support that there was fraud. A conclusion of the report was that the will of the people was unquestionable. According to their report, even though there were irregularities, the incumbent was unable to give solid evidence of the discrepancies. And on the way forward, they do advise that they take it to the court in election petition when they have that evidence. I myself have been asking for that evidence to be produced. I believe that this was an opportune time, even though the time has passed and there is no statement of recount, for the incumbent to show their SOPs and free themselves from the scrutiny of the people to show that, well, listen, look at our SOPs. It matches GCOM. And let us show that we can clear our name and we can go forward, but they didn't. And even though irregularities were found, CARICOM report clearly states that no evidence backed it.
I don't know about that. Anyhow, the other thing that we have failed to take into consideration, Holidar went to court, and the Chief Justice told Anil Nandalal that your evidence is weak. So when we keep talking about the Mingo fraud and the Mingo fraud, the court said that evidence of Mingo fraud was weak. But we seem to have forgotten that. We're still insisting that Mingo was fraudulent. So I don't know where we're going. The court said that you had little or no evidence of fraud perpetrated by Mingo. But we're still saying that Mingo perpetrated fraud. The question of the chair, I must admit that the chairperson in her submission to the court said she was prepared to. But she, and I don't think that she would have been able to say, let's have a recount. So Granger and Jagdeo agreed to a recount. And when Granger was asked, and funny, to show that he was serious about a free, fair, and transparent election, he refused to be sworn in. He could have been, but he declined to be sworn in. What does that say about the man? He did not want to go out there, although by then the International Committee was talking about sanctions and all of that. I have a view on sanctions. I've been living with sanctions in this country for God knows how long. But The fact that he opted for the recount, the fact that boxes were actually set aside, tells a story. Had those boxes not been counted, we would have had a different result. So the chairman, by her casting vote, tipped the scale in the other way.
So that brings us to the second part of my question. What is GCOM's role on the end game? Where does it stop? There's a continuous court game being played. Claudette Singh is in a unique position right now. She's the only person that can put this to a stop, in my opinion. But what do you think about that? Can we start with you, Mr. Shuman?
Yes, and I think you had asked this question before, and I think our discussion has overtaken us a bit while I'm enjoying it. The matter is that Guyana's apex court has already ruled on the process. They have already ruled on the results to be, or the numbers to be used for the declaration. Guyana's apex court has already dealt with that issue. So we're at the juncture now where we cannot walk over the law. We have to respect the law. We've had that very explicit ruling from the CCJ. Then it went back to the High Court with this latest one with Messina Jones. And Madam Chief Justice, in her delivery, in her ruling, said that these matters are all res judicata. She assumed jurisdiction and said it's res judicata. And it is that way because there needs to be a finality to these frivolous charges. I mean, what Yulita Moore did when the Canadian High Commissioner said these are frivolous things, just supervise compared to scrutinize. We all understand the reality of words. One single word in that sense. We understand the context under which CARICOM was coming here, but yet Yulita Moore chose to take that matter to court. And it was dealt with. Then they went from more votes.
Specifically Claudette Singh. We saw her ask Mr. Lowell to give a declaration based on the recount several times. But what do you believe is the next step on her behalf to put a finality to the process?
All right, so let me finish with this train of thought here, right? So you go from Yulita Moore challenging, then you go to votes, from votes to valid votes, then you go into this one now where you're challenging something where the CEO refused to comply with the directions of the commission. His superiors have said, go out and get this done and bring it back to me, and he outright refused. What is tiring to this nation is to continuously sit there and watch Madam Chair pander to the will of the APNU. She has to realize that the APNU at this juncture did not win the majority of votes. They do not enjoy the will of the people. And the will of the people is saying, we want a declaration and we want to know, but yet she continues to pander to what I would now view as the opposition APNUFC. She now goes about and pander to them so that if they even utter a word of legal challenge, then she completely stops the boat. But she would not listen to anyone else, which is very unfortunate. She has the power to do it. She has the authority to do it. There is no stay of execution that is holding her hand. So I really don't know if she's under duress. That is why she's not wanting to go that route. I really don't know if that is the case.
Well, Lenox, that can't be a fair statement. She has been doing that every time somebody goes to court. When the contempt motion went to court, although there was no stay, she halted. And if you pay attention to what happens, a general statement is that every time a matter is filed in the court, GCOM holds its hands. It's not for the only for APNU AFC. So it's unfair to say that she's pandering to the APNU AFC. If she was pandering, she would not have admitted those boxes. If she was pandering, she would have accepted Lowenfield's reports. She's not pandering to them. So that's an unfair statement. And but again, it's neither here nor there. You want to know where it will end. I think it will end now. After the appeal court rules, however it rules, that will be the end of the matter.
Adam, and I have to disagree with you. I hope for the country's sake that you are correct. But I remember yesterday, Basil Williams asked for the matter, at least asked for an opportunity to file an appeals, and he said, "Look, we want to get to the CCJ for a finality." So I have little confidence that the appeals court will be the final step in this process. I want to believe that we may end up at the CCJ, and after we end up at the CCJ, that the Granger administration will want to find another caveat in holding this country hostage. That is my view.
Well, I am not a fortune teller, but I do believe that the matter will end now. Yes, Basil talked about a counter. What I don't even remember the term he used. And he has to submit his thing by midnight tomorrow night. Am I right? I think so, yes. But indeed, this has been going on for too long. And even if there is a declaration, that will not be the end of this matter. Yes, there will be an elections petition. And I remembered in 1997, Claudette Singh was the judge. And she paid a big price for her decision. She never made it to Chief Justice. As a matter of fact, she was shunted to the side. So we're going to see the same thing. I don't know who the judge is going to be to hear the elections petition this time. And, you know, as has been noted in the entire Caribbean, elections petitions can take years. The PPP filed one in 2015. It hasn't been heard. Trinidad has one, oh God, for God knows how long. There is another one in St. Vincent, not coming up. So I'm not sure. And given how political we are, even if the coalition files an election petition, not sure it's going to be heard. Not sure it's going to be heard.
Okay, guys, we need to go on a short commercial break right now, and we'll continue.
Life has changed, but spending quality time with friends and family still remains important. So this summer you can still plan a vacation safely with an RV rental. Enjoy the comforts of home away from home. Call Globespan 718-845-0437. That's 718-845-0437. All RVs are self-contained and comes with all the amenities of a home on wheels. All so that your friends and family can be safe and comfortable. So don't wait. Call us now, 718-845-0437, and book your friends and family vacation with an RV today and explore as many states as you wish. And remember, travel plans, Globespan. Call us at 718-845-0437.
Good night again, everyone, and welcome back to Globespan 24/7 with our guests, Mr.Lenox Shuman and Mr. Adam Harris. When we went on the break, we were speaking about Claudette Singh's unique position in GCOM right now and bringing a closure to the electoral process that has been prolonged in Guyana. Mr. Shuman, Would you like to respond to Mr. Harris's last statement?
You got to remind him about it. Which one? Which one?
Well,
The one about, yeah, go on. I think she wants you to respond to the fact that you were unfair to Claudette pandering to the coalition. When I said she has been doing this every time a court action was filed.
I get you, Adam. I wanted to know which one specifically because you made several statements. And thanks for clearing that up. But I want to go back to that there was only one component when the contempt was filed, because the contempt was actually filed against Madam Chair and Claremont. It was actually filed against the commission, the chairman, the CEO, and the returning officer.
Correct.
So there are 4 people who were affected by that, and it is under that circumstance that she said, look, I'm going to have to stop this process and I'm going to undertake a recount. That is the only time that she would have stopped it for anyone else.
No.
But if you look at
she stopped it for you, Lita Moore. She stopped it for Anil. When Anil went to the court to not only the Holidar thing, but when, he went to the court over, what was it, a declaration? Anyhow, fact is that she has never, ever proceeded once there was an action of court, and that's true. That's true.
But Adam, you're not looking at the context. There was actually a stay of execution that was actually granted to the PPP that this cannot go on, and that is how she ended up stopping it to that process.
No, there was no stay. There never was a stay.
There was a stay of execution.
There was a stay. So when you look at that, because remember, one of the cases actually got to the CCJ where there was a stay of execution, and then all along those paths, there was a stay granted to the PPP. And I'm not speaking on behalf of the PPP, I'm speaking as the things that I would have seen and witnessed. So the only people that seem to get this courtesy without a stay of execution is the APNU AFC. And when you looked at Keith Lowenfield, for example, when the motion was filed against him, at the Aslan David case, there was absolutely nothing that prohibited them. There was no stay. There was no court matter actually filed to be heard or anything. But yet they said, all right, well, we'll just bring this machine to a stop and let this continue. So I don't know how much further we can go with this. I don't know how much more torture this nation can take. But I hope that at the next juncture, provided that there is no stay of execution, that we conclude this process and get on with the business of this country. We have been 20 plus months, close to 2 years actually, without a parliament. Actually, no, not close to 2 years, 20 plus months without a parliament. And well, when you look at it, when was the last sitting of parliament?
Last sitting of parliament after the contempt motion would have been January 2019. January 2019 or February 2019.
Yes. So can I bring your attention, gentlemen, to Guyana? And you'll be able to bring up the point in that question that I'm bringing now, because it's an ongoing discussion. Guyana is a sovereign nation. Looking at Guyana on an international aspect, the need for investors, the growth, the oil finds that we have going forward. What is the international impact on Guyana, in your opinion, based on all the political turmoil that we're going through right now? Mr. Shuman, would you like to lead it, please?
Well, I think it is going to. You see, when we used to go and sit on the benches in Barbados, and I mean, we're still mistreated in Trinidad quite a bit. But when we used to go to Caribbean countries and have to sit on a special bench, it is because we living under the dictatorship of Barnum at the time. So
Oh,
people
come
consider
on.
that you're not pretty much living in a democratic society that is equal to theirs, and then they decided to put you in this penalty box. That is the
Wait,
recognition.
wait
And
for
then I
one
think some of that
second.
still continued after the
While answering the
so
question, I would also ask you to give your closing remarks after the question because as interesting as it is, we are running out of time. So after your opinion on the international impact, please also give your closing remarks.
Lennox? Still Lennox? Okay.
Yes.
absolutely. So let me wrap this up very quickly. It has destroyed Guyana's international image. It is going to take generations to heal. And what the APNU has done is saddled their young leaders with a very tainted image that they will need a massive buffing machine, amongst other things, reformulation. They've saddled these young leaders with such a heavy burden that it is going to be difficult for them to win a political majority in Guyana again. And that is very unfortunate. The old leaders have destroyed the future of those young and vibrant leaders, and it is very unfortunate.
I want to say that internationally, any big country can pressure a small one. Lennox said people are sitting on the bench in Barnum time. That is not true. The bench came about when Jack Deere was the president. And we were labeled a narco state. If you look at what the Americans were saying, Priya Manikchan went to the home of, what the devil is the name of the ambassador, and actually gave him what Roger Luncheon called a feral blast. And the Americans weren't happy with that either. They have been applying sanctions to Guyana. Even during Jack Deere tenure, we had at least 3 ministers and a police commissioner who had their visas revoked. We had a time when no government employee was being allowed to get a visa. So we've been there. You talk about the young political leaders being tarnished and all of this. Yes, this contest has been bruising. It has destroyed a lot of people. It has destroyed relationships in Guyana. The one good thing about it is that we tend to have short memories. We are going to have to live with our neighbors, and there is going to be some mistrust. You're saying that young political leaders will have a rough time acceding to power in the future. I don't believe you, because governments always makes missteps, and people will notice. If the PPP gets back into power now, 5 years wasn't that long ago, and something happens, people are going to say, hey, you know, the same thing they come back doing, and that will stick. I want to say that it was interesting. Yes, we had some misrepresentations in this discussion, but at least we got some points across. And I thank you for inviting me.
All right, thank you very much. In closing, allow me to say that I agree with Mr. Shuman that the young people coming forward would have a hard time because the battle, as been pointed out by the APNU supporters, is not just against the USA, but you have the European Union who made a call today. You have the OAS nations, you have the CARICOM nations. This is a vast majority of countries who have also been embarrassed by some of the comments and the public statements made by supporters. So the young people going forward would have to clean up everything that has happened. Gentlemen, we have come to the end of this segment. I thank you very much for being here with us tonight on Globespan. I thank the audience for staying with us. Let me remind them that Globespan is still here because of the support of the audience. If they would like to donate to the program to keep it going, all the details are on the website, on the webpage, on Facebook also. They can do so. I'm sorry that the program has come to an end so fast. The discussion was very fruitful, and we got across many points tonight. Looking forward to working with you both in the future. So thank you very much for listening tonight.